Right, so I introduced myself earlier. I want to talk to you about something entirely different from what I put into the programme when we were designing the day. I was going to talk about AI update, but given Wednesday's announcement of the final report of the Curriculum and Assessment Review and the DfE's response, this seems particularly timely. I have not given this talk before, so there may be all sorts of mistakes. That's just raised the interest all of a sudden of where is it going to go wrong here. Right, so this is the title of their report, Building a World-Class Curriculum for All, and that seems to figure a lot in DfE thinking. We want to be at the forefront of this. We want to be the best country in the world for teaching kids. And there are areas in which we are already doing that. Famously, we said we were the first country in the world to put computer science onto its curriculum as an entitlement for children from the age of 5 up to 16 the last time round. And so how do you maintain your momentum there? How do you stay at the front of this? Becky Francis introduces the report with, this is, as it says, a world-class curriculum and assessment system. Notice the italics, for all. Inclusion is very high up her agenda, sought to ensure that the curriculum is fit for the future, addresses the rich knowledge and skills young people need to thrive in our fast-changing world, and wait for it, encourages a love of learning. I love the idea that the report on this mentions love of learning, but this is in there, isn't it? This is so different from what they set up as the aims for the current national curriculum. If you ever bother to read that section, it is about passing on the best that has been thought and said. It's what we know being passed on to the next generation. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm quite excited about the future-facing nature of this. How do you get kids to thrive in a fast-changing world? When these gentlemen leave school, what will their university courses, will there be university courses? What will their employment prospects be? The curriculum which we have at the moment does well for many, many children, but regrettably not for all children. Look at the percentage achieving expected standards in reading, in writing, in maths, compared to disadvantaged and not disadvantaged kids. Look at the Progress 8 score for advantaged kids, not disadvantaged kids, and those who have been entitled to free school meals. That Progress 8 is negative for those on free school meals is appalling. Still like that, and something really should be done. It was getting better. On this chart, lower numbers are better numbers. This is the gap between the most and the least affluent. It was improving very, very well until, I don't know, like 2020 or something, when other things may have had effect, yeah? And it seems to have got worse in the years post-COVID, possibly getting a little bit better at Key Stage 2, but it's perhaps too early to tell whether that trend will return to being downwards. So, this is about a curriculum for all pupils. This is an entitlement for everybody, but we know that giving young people some say in what they study at school perhaps helps a lot in terms of engagement, in terms of preparation for agency and autonomy and all of that. And it's a really tricky one for Becky advising the government to get the balance right there between you should learn these things whether you want to or not, but school also should provide you with an opportunity to pursue your own interests and enthusiasms and go much, much further in that dimension. Where would you put the balance between everybody needs to know this and this is for those who are interested and excited about it? We teach all kids poetry, not because there are so many opportunities for professional poets, not because we need a pipeline through to the big poetry industry, but because we decide this is something all pupils should know, whether they want to or not. How do you get that balance right is interesting. There's a long list of principles here. I'm not going to go through each bullet point one at a time. I want to draw your attention, though, to curriculum for all. There is a recognition in Becky Francis and her committee's work that this needs to reflect the full diversity of modern British society. This cannot be, forgive me for characterising here, based on what a particular schools minister was taught when he was at prep school. This is about the modern world. I think rightly so. And yeah, there is an involvement for teachers in the next stage of the process. DfE have called for people to respond to a tender saying, do you want to write the national curriculum? And they've got that list already. But those people will be responsible for drawing teachers into the design and testing phase of the putting together the programme of study. They said nothing about getting pupils involved in designing and testing the programme of study. Sorry, chaps, but perhaps you have teachers who will be able to represent those views. There's also a thing about you can't leave it, at least for some subjects, to every 12 or 13 years of doing a holistic review of the whole of the curriculum. The last time we did this was 2012. Our subject has changed quite a lot over those intervening years. So the idea is that there should be some sort of periodic refresh. I don't think they're quite thinking about the second Tuesday of each month they release a new version of the programmes of study. Probably a slightly lengthier timescale than that. Okay, it's a curriculum and assessment review, and we ought to talk a little about assessment, because secondary school teachers, and indeed upper primary school teachers, know that this is actually what drives so much of what happens in school. So the good news, no, okay, exams are here to stay. There is no notion of let's move away from terminal summative, paper-based, I suspect, exams. They're really worried about expanding the scope of non-exam assessment, because that's clearly something where the AIs can come in and do all of the coursework for the kids. And they want to maintain, I would say it as the reliability of the qualification there. So they're reluctant to expand scope for NEAs. On the other hand, they say assessment should be authentic, that if the way you do the subject draws on technology in the real world, and perhaps drawing on technology when the subject is being assessed at GCSE or beyond might not be an entirely crazy idea. So the use of technology, the particular mode of assessment, needs to reflect the authentic character of the actual subject. There is also, I think I'm pleased to see this, a recognition that T-levels were only for some kids. I don't know if any of you got sixth forms in your school, but trying to run a T-level in a school sixth form, it is a nightmare. It's bad enough in an FE college. So this notion of actually, it's not A-levels or T-levels. There was something to be said for BTECs, for AAQs, and so having a regulated V-level, vocational level qualification that a kid could do a couple of A-levels and a V-level, that you could have a mixed experience of curriculum and qualification up at 16 to 19. Okay, all of which is by way of preamble. Let's move on to what's actually happening around computing. Okay, so firstly, a recognition that there are external factors. It's not simply what academic computer scientists think everybody needs to know in order to be able to do computer science. The subject changes dramatically, and we need to be aware of this fast-changing nature of the world. A recognition at last that digital literacy really matters. Being able to word process, being able to use ChatGPT or whatever, being able to make a presentation, being able to use a pivot table, TIG, is probably more important than being able to move the cat across the screen. Maybe? I don't know. Right, okay. So digital literacy is important, thank goodness, okay? And there's a good definition of this. I think this is characterized or based on a lot of the BCS's work in this really important domain. And indeed, this is crucial to economic success, to being able to get jobs, to being able to make pivot tables and all of that. Parents recognized this when they did their survey about what should be included in Key Stage 4. Digital skills computing was second from the top of the list. Finance and budgeting, being able to model a mortgage, came high. Interestingly, Key Stage 4 kids, much less enthusiastic about digital skills and computing than their parents. We need to do something about that, I think. They say digital literacy's home is computing. So this is rethinking what we mean by computing, to recognize that digital literacy starts with computing. Yes, it will be applied elsewhere, but it starts within our subject area. And this matters at all four key stages, and they're very, very critical of what happens at Key Stage 4 in computing. The current program of study has like this opportunity to study paragraph and then 3 very, very brief bullet points about, new ways to protect their online identity. I didn't want it to be like that. Back in 2012, when we did it the first time round, I wanted Key Stage 4 to be done seriously by all kids. So I drafted a proper program of study for Key Stage 4, but it was decided, passive voice there, to make it that very, very watered down program of study that you now see. There's also talk about media literacy, about being able to be able to tell whether something is misinformation or disinformation. Talk amongst yourselves later about the difference between misinformation and disinformation. I'm going to have to teach this, including the stuff which is generated by the AIs, the slop. The Prime Minister himself is very, very much committed to AI being central to the country's future, inspired by what he sees happening over in South Korea about they are teaching it in their curriculum. China is doing it in their curriculum. Other work I've done, the King says we had to include AI in our curriculum. The President says we have to include AI in their curriculum in other jurisdictions. So we're starting to lag behind what other jurisdictions are doing. So they want to bring that into the computing curriculum. Yes, AI is far broader than computing, but they should learn how to use AI effectively without becoming dependent on it. Balance. Engaged in the development knowledge of both AI's strengths and limitations becomes part of the new computing curriculum, I think. And remember, this is a curriculum for all. This is compulsory from age 5 to age 16, whether or not they are interested in this, whether or not they want careers as software engineers when they leave school. It's very hard to think of a job where there's not going to be some use of IT. And that's what needs to be at the heart of this curriculum. Moving the cat across the screen may matter. Being able to use technology well and with wisdom matters even more. And this particularly impacts on Key Stage 4. What is it? Polling conducted found that about 8% of teachers from maintained schools report that computing is taught at Key Stage 4 only to the GCSE computer science crowd. Technically illegal? Well, maybe not in an academy, to be honest, but in a local authority-funded school, they're not using the national curriculum, which says this is an entitlement for all. So they want to fix that. They think one of the reasons why it's not going well is because we're not clear enough in the program of study. I think the computer science bits are specified very, very clearly. There's a lot of vague language and horrible drafting when we move into the information technology and digital literacy. So one of the jobs, whoever gets the tender to rewrite this, will be to actually be really clear about what that actually means, possibly including some examples there. And of course, that is going to include AI quite explicitly, and indeed the GCSE computing specifications will also have to include AI. So AI becomes part of national curriculum computing. The big news is that we're going to abolish GCSE computer science. Okay, it didn't get the cheer I was expecting. All right. But we're going to replace that with a proper GCSE in computing. Crazy situation at the moment that computing is IT and digital literacy and computer science, but you can only get a GCSE in computer science. It's like everybody has to learn science, but we're only going to offer a GCSE in physics. That would not be the way you would design a system of assessment. So GCSE broadens significantly further than the core of computer science. I can claim some credit, not all of the credit, some credit for this. So 2019, when I think it was like the last edition of Hello World I edited, I said, we need a GCSE in computing. That could be why it was the last edition that I edited. Never mind. Okay. And said, we need to rethink the GCSE, a qualification which reflects the whole breadth of computing. The DfE are using my language in some of their press releases. I don't know, I feel some sense of pride there. So we broaden this out. My former colleague Pete Kemp and I have put together a reasoned argument for why that's a sensible thing to do. That was part of his, mine, and the BCS's submission to the Curriculum and Assessment Review, and I'm so pleased that they have seen it our way. We also started to scope out what would you include in a GCSE in computing. None of this is about take away the really important programs, algorithms, computational thinking bit, but go beyond that. So we said lots and lots of core computer science knowledge, but also cyber ethics, legal aspects of this, digital rights, all of that, and then lots more on the skills side about managing projects, about working with data, about working in a range of different media, And yeah, really important skills like collaboration and using AI effectively. And then we also thought about how would you assess this? And our idea is half of the marks there go from a practical exam, not a non-exam assessment because that's so vulnerable to the AI. You bring them in, confiscate their phones, check their ID cards, give them a set task, and 3 hours later you hand that back to the exam board for marking. So this becomes a subject which is assessed practically. Some awarding organisations already do that for computer science. We know this works. And then a proper exam paper which looks at the principles of CS, the concepts of IT, practices of digital literacy. This is our humble suggestion. This is not DFE policy yet. It's crossed. Okay. So how do you feel about that? What do you reckon? Curriculum and assessment review? Step in the right direction. Okay. Important as your opinions are, they're not actually the ones that matter here. What matters is what does Bridget Phillipson think about this? So this is an independent review of curriculum and assessment. What matters is what the Secretary of State says about that review. I think they have worked quite closely as the review was progressing. I don't think the Secretary of State was waiting for 10:30 on Tuesday evening to see her first copy of this, because we got the government's response very, very quickly. They're quite clear, and the brief to Becky Francis was quite clear. This needs to be evolution, not revolution. Many of the people submitting proposals to the Call for Evidence said, you need to reinvent the whole of the English education system, starting from the ground up. DFE said, I don't think so. Let's keep what's good and make it better. Maintain the existing structure, subjects, key stages, assessment, qualifications, national primary assessments, the SAT stay. Yay! Okay, GCSEs stay, T-levels stay, A-levels stay. Okay, they agree to the principles that the Curriculum and Assessment Review adopted. I think it would have come as a shock to us if they rejected that foundation, that assumption. Martin, I will share the slides later. Okay, they say this has to be an entitlement for all, including those who are in academies. As it stands at the moment, academies get to choose their own curriculum. It's policed, there is a funding agreement in place, but they have autonomy over following the national curriculum or not. The Secretary of State is going to remove that freedom from them in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill and say every state-funded school must follow the national curriculum. Not all academy heads think that's a move in the right direction, but I think I do. Yeah. Anybody remember ICTAC? ICT across the curriculum. We don't need ICT as a subject. We can deliver this across all of the curriculum subjects. They can word process in their English lessons. They can do pivot tables over in maths or whatever. This is not a return to ICTAC, but it is a recognition that the digital skills they learn in their computing lessons might have applications beyond their computing lessons. So it starts in computing, but then they use the skills and the concepts in other subjects too. And I think DFE are quite serious about tagging those links, about recognizing where there is an opportunity to apply digital skills in other subject areas. My concern is unless it makes it onto the GCSE spec, schools will say, oh yes, we're definitely doing that, and move on. So assessment matters for this. Okay, so you know where Becky Francis was heading with this, but this is just the Secretary of State agrees. The refreshed curriculum will teach pupils AI literacy, how to use data to complete tasks and solve problems. This is CT 2.0, if you wish. It's not just about the algorithm now. It's about what is my training data, how do I train a machine learning model to be able to apply itself to this. So, where you say it's a sequence of steps, it is, but it's also a set of rules, and those rules can be established by the machine. Is that 2 minutes left, Tig?
No, that was your 5-second count.
That was my 5 second. I missed the 2 minutes. Okay, right. I wait for the chair to tell me to sit down. Right, okay. Replacing the GCSE with a broader offer that reflects the entirety of computing. You saw that in 2019 in the Hello World comment column. There is then this real surprise, not in Becky Francis's recommendations, but in the DFE's response to curriculum and assessment review, that they will explore, not very committed, introducing a new level 3 qualification in data science and AI to ensure that more young people can secure high-value skills for the future, cement the UK's position as a global leader in AI and technology. And yeah, I think that's going to take a good 4 years to develop that, so we'll definitely still be in the lead by that point. Not saying an A-level, could be an A-level, could be an EPQ, could be a V-level. We don't quite know what a new level 3 qualification looks like. Who's done NCCE courses in their time or used NCCE resources? The funding was really cut for the 1st of April this year, but they're committed to at least continuing funding for it in the future. And given how much they're saying about a new computing curriculum, new computing GCSEs, I'm glad there's going to be at least some training for teachers in delivering this. Very, very enthusiastic about enrichment opportunities. I've just highlighted tiny, tiny blue down at the bottom right here that coding becomes an enrichment thing. So if you're running a code club, that will make meet Ofsted's metrics for engagement beyond that. Progress 8 changes us to some extent. There is this breadth of curriculum part which becomes part of Progress 8, no longer an EBAC basket. But for Progress 8, you have to have at least 2 breadth qualifications. You have to have two of the following 3 things: humanities, creative subjects, languages. I don't think they're suggesting Python counts as a language for this purpose, but I think there is the possibility that GCSE computing could count as a creative subject. And I think that would be really exciting. Currently, computer science counts as a science, but GCSE computing could be seen as a creative subject for this purpose. Timeline. So we won't see any programs of study until spring 2027, unless you happen to be one of the teachers helping with the design of this. September 2020, well, we might see drafts before that point. So the new national curriculum takes effect in September 2028, almost 3 years away from when we're meeting today. And then you've got phase 1 GCSEs, computing is likely to be a phase 1 GCSE, specs released for September 2029, kids getting GCSE computing sometime in the summer of 2031. 2031 seems a really long way away, doesn't it? So we will get there. The slides are all online. I have overrun my time, and there are other really interesting people to hear from next, but thank you.